Why does CBT appear to fail so many people with anxiety? So CBT, or Cognitive Behavioural Therapy, is probably the most popular therapy model in the world. It's probably practiced more than any other model. Yet, based on the clients that I speak to, there are so many people for whom CBT just didn't work, or they had a negative experience with that model. Yet the peer-reviewed research papers show that CBT can really work. So what is causing this big discrepancy between the research papers and people's individual experiences? That's what I want to try and answer in this video. As if you've tried CBT or you've tried therapy and it hasn't worked, you're going to have your own individual experience and opinion on this, and I'd love to hear from you. And if you're considering a therapy and CBT is on your shortlist, you might be seeing a lot of these negative experiences as well and wondering whether you should avoid CBT altogether. And then later on in the video, I'm going to tell you the approach that I take instead, as I, like many of you guys, I'm not a huge fan of CBT. So just first, I want to give you 2 quick points, which are, I guess, almost in defense of CBT. Then after that, I'm going to explain to you what I think is the core reason for this big discrepancy between research paper outcomes and individual experiences. And then after that, I'll talk to you about my alternative approach. So CBT, I think 2 things to consider first. CBT is the most popular therapy model out there. So it's just a numbers game. There are millions and millions of people that have tried this model. So there are naturally going to be lots of people for whom it didn't work are going to have negative experiences. So if there's a less popular model that's the same effectiveness, you're going to hear more negative experiences about CBT purely because more people have tried the model. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. The second thing, and this mainly applies to the UK, in the UK, Frontline Therapy services from the NHS are often an online CBT course. And these courses, they have their place and they can get some outcomes. But if you compare doing an online course where you're kind of solely responsible for your results versus doing one-on-one talk therapy with someone who's very experienced in CBT and can put together a bespoke treatment package for you, the outcomes are going to be very different. So someone saying CBT didn't work for me because they tried an online course versus someone that had one-on-one, maybe multiple sessions one-on-one with a CBT expert and got results, very, very different types of outcomes. So those are 2 things to keep in mind. Now, the thing that I think is the big issue, CBT stands for Cognitive Behavioural Therapy. Yet if you ask most people that have tried CBT, what is CBT? They're probably going to sum it up as something along the lines of being aware of and then challenging your thoughts. That's pretty much what it is, or that's what a lot of people think it is. But that is just, I guess, the C of the CBT, the cognitive part of CBT. And I think this is where the issue lies, is that part of the process for many people is often extremely uncomfortable. If you've got anxiety already, you're probably overthinking things, you're worrying, you're ruminating. So the last thing you want to do is be even more in your own head, being on red alert for any of these thoughts that you need to challenge. So CBT can sometimes have an amplifying effect. So some people start to feel worse before they feel better. And I don't just put this on the client, because I see this with a lot of therapists that practice CBT. They spend too much time at the C on the cognitive part of things. And I think what happens is clients find that part so difficult and so uncomfortable that they often don't get to experience the full process, which is where, I guess you might say, the progress can really happen. So CBT has a cognitive side, but it also has the behavioral side. And when I say the behavioral side, what that means is basically exposure, which is doing the things that you currently find uncomfortable to do. And by doing those things repeatedly and building up to them over time, that will teach your body that that is safe, and then your anxiety will start to reduce. And when they've compared CBT versus just exposure on its own, for the majority of mental health conditions, exposure on its own was just as effective as CBT when you look at the outcomes. So what that suggests is that for many people, if you didn't do the cognitive side of CBT, you can still get extremely good outcomes without having to do the bit that most people do not like. And that's also, for me, the bit that puts the most people off and leads to basically the failure in therapy, where people stop coming to therapy. So I think this explains that discrepancy between the peer-reviewed papers where they're controlled studies and people are completing the course of treatment. So they're doing the cognitive side and the behavioural side, the exposure side of things, versus people that maybe have just tried an online course, or they've done a little bit of CBT with someone and they've done the cognitive side. They found it wasn't for them, and then they didn't even get to the exposure side, so they never actually made any progress. So for me, I had a very similar experience with CBT. On the NHS, I got referred to an online course. I found it a complete waste of time. I think I saw 2 different CBT therapists over the years, and both very similar experiences, predominantly focused on trying to deal with those thoughts, trying to argue with those thoughts, so to speak. And anyone that suffers with anxiety will tell you we have very little control over the part of the brain that sends us those thoughts. So for me, the best thing to do is not to engage with that side even more. So with that said, what's my approach? What therapy model do I believe in? Well, when I'm doing therapy, I draw from lots of different therapy models, as everyone has their own individual challenges, and each therapy model has different pros and cons. So it's trying to match things up as best as possible. But at its core, I often come back to a therapy called ACT, which ironically is classed as a CBT type therapy. I think it's classed as a third wave therapy. The big difference between ACT and CBT, they both have the exposure, the behavioral element to them. But with CBT, you're being on alert for those thoughts, you're trying to challenge them. Whereas with ACT, you're aware that the thoughts are there. You're looking if the thoughts are helpful. If they are, we act upon them. If they're not, we let them be. We learn how to make space for them. We learn how to accept them. We figure out what's important to us, what's going to motivate us to do the difficult exposures, the behavioral therapy side of ACT that will help you make real progress. So that is my overall take on CBT. Yes, it can work, but I think it mainly works when the behavioral and the exposure stuff is done. I don't think the cognitive stuff is necessary for a lot of mental health conditions. And by making it a part of the requirements of the overall process, it puts off a lot of people who never actually complete the therapy. So I'd love to hear your experiences with CBT. Did your therapist mainly focus on the cognitive side? Was there any exposure? Maybe you found CBT helpful. I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments. Now, anxiety used to control my life, and I was able to break free from that. And if you want to know how I did that, I'm going to pop up a video now, and I'll see you guys over there.